Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Evaluating Your Learning Strategy Workshop and Masterclass, brought to you by Insignia Training Partners. My name is Bernie DeSantis, and I'm the owner of Insignia Training Partners. We're an outsourced training and resource provider, and today I'll be your producer. So we do intend for this to be an interactive and engaging session today. There we go. So please do participate in the chat and activities as we proceed throughout the course today. Also, please be advised that we are recording our event. Please post your questions or comments in the chat, or of course, if you'd like to come off of mute and participate verbally, please raise your hand and we will call on you to do so. With that, I'd like to introduce Michelle King. She is one of our fractional chief learning officers and is a dynamic and visionary leader with over 2 decades of rich experience in learning and development and DEI. With an extensive background in curriculum development, talent management, and organizational change, she's dedicated to crafting powerful learning strategies and cultivating inclusive cultures within forward-thinking organizations. So join us in welcoming a true catalyst for change who is committed to making a significant impact in the workplace and beyond. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. I love that. That's a good introduction. All right. Well, we're going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker this morning, and nothing to do with what we're talking about today, just something fun to give you an opportunity to think. So what I'd like you to do is go over to Menti. This is the instructions. You can use the QR code, or you can enter the code by going to menti.com. And then you're going to answer one question today, and then I'm going to put it up on the screen, and we'll see what everybody had to say. So let me stop sharing. We're going to go over to Menti. Let me know if you're having any trouble getting in. I can share. All right, so again, here are the instructions, and you should be able to answer the question. If you could instantly become an expert in one skill or hobby, what would it be? And you can enter more than one. I think I gave you 2 or 3 options to go ahead and enter. Then it's gonna come up with a word cloud, and we'll see what some people would love to be an instant expert in. Pilot. Oh, that's a good one. AI. Boy, an instant expert AI would get you far right now, right? Racing cars, backpacking, space travel. That's really cool. Reading people. I don't know. Do you really want to be an expert in that? That could be kind of scary. Kayaking, viticulture. Ooh, I'm gonna have to learn more about that. Gardening. Yes, I love gardening. I was so sad the other day. I have a hydroponic garden, and the switch flipped the breaker flipped on my switch, and I came outside and all my plants were half dead. All right, some really cool ones. Let's see. Look what a diverse audience we have. Viticulture. Somebody's gonna have to tell me what viticulture is, though. What's viticulture? Ooh, marlin fishing, Tony. Oh, link in the chat. Thank you. Marlin fishing. I've never marlin fished. I've never fished for anything that was deep sea before. It looks hard and exhausting. All right, so let's go ahead and go back over to our presentation. Put myself in the correct mode first. All right.
Oh, Hannah, I did not know that viticulture is growing grapes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, did not know that either. I've never heard of that before. Okay, why is this not cooperating? There we go. All right, so there we go. All right, let me get back to my screen. There we go. Cooperate with me. All right. Okay, so we should be back on. You should be able to see the screen now. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for that little icebreaker. So today what we're going to be talking about is evaluating your learning strategy. So how do you enhance your learning I keep getting distracted by the beeps. Your learning initiatives to drive organizational success. So the learning objectives for today is, first of all, the importance of a learning strategy evaluation, then popular evaluation frameworks, practical tools and techniques, and how to leverage AI in learning. So by the end, you'll have some actionable insights to apply in your organization. And you should get a participant guide that is uploaded into chat by Bernie. You can utilize that. You can download it, print it, and follow along. There is space for notes in it. So if you want to utilize that, you can go ahead and grab that out of chat. All right, so let's start with thinking about where is everyone with evaluating their learning strategy. So we're going to go back to Menti and answer the question, what method do you currently use to evaluate your learning strategies? So we're going to head back over really quick. If you don't have the QR code, it should be in chat. So let's take a look at what everyone had to say. I'll go back to share my screen. All right. KPIs, CSAT.
I meant testing there, not that.
Testing.
Like fat fingers.
Surveys, CSAT, KPIs, one-on-one conversations, assessments. Okay. Good. All right, so you do have some methods for utilizing your learning, how to evaluate your learning strategies. So we have metrics, surveys. Okay, good. We're going to talk about a lot of these today. All right, so let's talk now in a little bit more detail about how to actually go about doing evaluating your learning strategy and how to prepare for that. All right, cool. I love the word cloud. Oh, user adoption. That's another good one. Okay. So lots of different ways and methods for doing that. All right, great. All right, let's go back over. Okay, go to. All right. Okay, so as you can see, people use a lot of different methodologies. So today, what we're going to talk about is the importance of learning strategy evaluation, frameworks and models, and practical tools and techniques. And we're going to start with talking about the impact of learning strategy on an organization. So one of the things I wanted to do in this webinar is to level set the idea that a learning organization or learning people within an organization are not just there to be order takers, right? We're supposed to be part of the conversation the entire time because learning strategy is what delivers on the organizational goals. So learning strategy isn't just about delivering content, right? It's about aligning with organizational goals that boost performance and efficiency. So by evaluating your learning strategies, you're going to ensure that the training programs are effective, they're relevant, they're aligned with the business objectives, and this process helps us make data-driven decisions. It justifies investments in training, and it also helps us to continuously improve, right? So what I have here is some of the impacts of a learning strategy on an organization. So first is skill development and adaptability. And why it says 83% there is that each of these is a stat that I'm going to share with you. So 83% of managers observed increased motivation among team members who are given time to learn in their work week. So if you're making time for people to actually participate in learning, you're going to see increased motivation and development of skills. The second one is increased engagement and retention. This is a critical part of the learning strategy that people don't talk about. When people feel that employees feel they are getting the learning that they need, that it's aligned with their own goals within the company, they stay longer. So 94% of employees said they would stay at a company longer if it invested in their learning and development. Then we've got the cultivation of leadership. So organizations prioritizing leadership development through continuous learning, see a 9% increase in their leaders' sense of, connection with the company, engagement, and a 2.4 times increase in retention rates. Enhance culture. So 87% of business leaders believe that developing the right workplace model, which includes continuous learning and innovation, that's going to lead to organizational success. So even though only 24% of those feel that their organization is actually ready to address the trend. So 87% of business leaders say, yep, developing the right workplace model, which includes continuous learning, is a priority, but about 24% of them believe their organization is actually ready to address that trend. And then improved performance, right? So according to a study highlighted by McKinsey, companies that commit to continuous improvement, they actually see a dramatic reduction in time to market. Now, that is critical when you're in a business. Time to market is one of the most important KPIs, right? So citing an example where product testing was cut by more than 80% through incremental improvements in team collaboration and product optimization, process optimization. So as you can see, the impact of a learning strategy on the organization is immeasurable in ways. I mean, we can measure it clearly because we have stats, but it's immeasurable in the deep impact that it makes in your organization. So having a learning strategy is not an option. It is a mandatory part of your organizational alignment. So, like I said, learning development is not just for individual advancement, but also for ensuring organizations have a robust pipeline of capable leaders that are ready to navigate the complexities of modern business landscapes. And let's be honest, if there isn't a more complex business landscape than there is now, I don't know when there has been one, right? It's very complex right now with AI and the integration of new technologies, et cetera. All right, so what do we do I want to turn on chat, sorry, so that I can see what people are saying as well. All right, so what do we do to actually start thinking about how we would understand a learning strategy evaluation? How would I even go about creating a learning strategy? So as we've talked about, it's crucial for organizational learning effectiveness. It provides essential feedback. It allows you to understand what you're creating and how it's in alignment with business objectives. It really acts as a critical control mechanism, guiding organizations in fostering a culture of innovation and adaptation. And as we know, right now, we're all trying to adapt to new business models, right? So we're going to start with a needs assessment. So learning strategy evaluation has 4 components. Needs assessment is the first one. And now I want to emphasize that all 4 of these are really important, but a needs assessment is the most critical piece, because if you don't identify the gaps between your current state and the state that you desire for things to be in from a learning perspective, then you're not going to be able to actually address this. So a needs assessment identifies the gaps between current and desired state. It allows you to look at where are those gaps, and also what's causing those gaps. And here is where I will say that if you have a large organization, you're probably would have a challenging time doing needs assessment for the entire organization. But it's helpful to bring in an outside company that does this and specializes in needs assessment, just because you're getting a lot more objectivity, and you're also probably able to identify the cause of some of those gaps a little bit more easily than you would if you were just doing this internally. That's not always the option, but a needs assessment is critical to ensuring that you are creating a good learning strategy. So the next thing is that you have curriculum design. So curriculum design essentially is just the planning of the educational content and strategies. And what you want to think about in your curriculum design is aligning what the needs assessment is with what kind of educational content you need to fill those gaps, right? It's not that complicated when you think about it theoretically, but when you practice it, it's quite involved. It takes quite a bit of time to come up with a plan, unless it's like a simple gap, right? But in most companies, there's quite a few gaps that need to be addressed. And of course, learning is always changing, because what's happening? The business is always changing. The market is always changing. The organization is reorging. There's all of these things that are happening that you have to adapt and adjust to. And if you've worked in learning at all, you know that it's constant. We're constantly changing because the organization is constantly changing. The next thing you have to think about is delivery method. So how are you going to deliver this content? And that seems like a straightforward response if you're like, well, we have an LMS and we can just deliver it online. But not all curriculum is best delivered online. Sometimes you need instructor led. Sometimes you, even if it's virtual instructor led, sometimes you can do this asynchronously. You can do this in flipped classrooms. There are so many different ways to deliver content, and not all content it should be delivered exactly the same way. So I would say for, what does it say, Bruce? Teach the need to know, provide references to the nice to know. Oh, I love that. That's a good one, Bruce. So when you think about it, so I'll ask you, if you had to deliver leadership training, would you do that as an online training, or do you think that would be better served as an in-person or mixed training? What's your opinion of that? Mixed modalities, yeah, Joe. That's like blended, yep. One-on-one, that would be best, Dawn. I agree with you on that. Both, really, yeah. So one of the things is that you have to be considering these things, though. What is the delivery method that's going to get the learning to happen in a way that is most conducive for the audience, right? Depends on the schedule of the audience. Oh, Kirby, so true. So true. And we're battling so many different things when we're talking about delivery methods, right? Availability, obviously cost, etc. All right, so the next thing is outcomes measurement. And I will tell you that I have worked in learning for many a year, 20 plus years. And one of the things that I found is how many organizations don't actually measure outcomes. And listen, you're not going to be able to get budget. You're not going to be able to make the case for why you need this learning to be developed if you don't actually measure the outcomes. And I mean beyond just like, oh, people said they liked it. Right? And we're going to talk about some of the models that you can use that for measurement coming up. But it's really important that you think about this outcome measurement. All right, so those are the 4 components that we're going to talk about first. Then the other thing to think about is, what is the method for evaluating organizational learning? What are some of the methods you can use? So I'm going to talk about 3 examples of how to conduct learning initiative evaluations. These are just 3 examples. There are many different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to start with Kirkpatrick, because let's be honest, Kirkpatrick is kind of the gold standard. Lauren had a webinar a few weeks ago, and she talked quite a bit about Kirkpatrick model, 4 levels in that. I'm going to go into more detail about Kirkpatrick in a little bit, but just know that what you're measuring is reaction, learning, behavior, and results. Oh, Susan says we're using Brinkerhoff's success case method. Oh, interesting. I'll have to learn a little bit more about that. Also, Kirby, I love your comment. Completion is not comprehension. Applause for that. It is not comprehension. Yes, I agree. My people. So this is just really looking at what are the reactions, how much did they learn, or did learning happen, which we kind of need to know, right? What behavior changes and what were the results of that? And so I'm going to give later on, I'm going to give a case study on each of the models, not that you can use, or some of the models that you can use. As you can see, Susan said there was another model she uses that I don't have in this presentation. So there's a lot of different models. I'm going to use some of the most common ones. The other thing to think about is using learning analytics and data mining. So how are we going to get this information, right? So if we're evaluating organizational learning, where does the data come from? Well, one of the places is that you can get completion rates. Again, we know that's not comprehension, but it is a completion rate, and it does tell us some data, right? You can use advanced analytics, especially if you have an LMS. If you don't have an LMS, there are other ways to track analytics. Back in the day, before there was standard LMSs, I did a lot of tracking on Excel spreadsheets, I'm just going to say. So there are advanced analytics that you can use as well. And then correlating learning data with performance data. And that often you have to use observation or performance evaluations for that. But there are a lot of different ways that you can go about it. Then the next thing is 360-degree feedback and performance assessments. So when you're thinking about 360-degree feedback, you're identifying application of any new skills. So did people apply the skills that they learned? Getting some qualitative data from stakeholders, feedback. If you work in learning, you know that we're all about feedback, and we definitely have to implement feedback or integrate feedback into everything that we're doing. You constantly are being evaluated, and you're constantly having to evaluate in learning. And then identifying areas where additional training or support is needed. So when you're starting to think about this, thinking about the methods that you're going to use for evaluating organizational learning. And again, I'm going to get into some frameworks in a little bit that will help you think about this as well. All right. Now, that's great, Michelle, but obviously we're going to run into some challenges, and that is true. You are going to run into challenges, and I'm going to talk about some of the most common ones that you're going to run into. So when we think about the challenges you're going to face when you're conducting an effective learning evaluation, these obstacles can really impact the success of your training initiatives, right? So the first thing is misalignment of learning initiatives with organizational goals. The absolute goal of learning in an organization is to ensure that the organization can meet their goals through the use of learning and development in the organization. So are you responsible for all the goals? No, but you are contributing to the success of those goals, and it is a significant contributing factor. So you need to make sure that the learning initiatives are aligned with the organizational goals. The next thing is inadequate needs assessment. So as I said earlier, one of the things people do is they try to do a needs assessment, but they're not really sure how to do it. And then it becomes kind of useless because they don't really identify the gaps very well. So it's really important to understand that that needs assessment needs to be robust, and you need to talk to a lot of people and gather a lot of information. It needs to be comprehensive. So if you don't do it correctly, that's going to be a problem. The next thing, of course, is, thank you, Susan. The next thing is resistance to change among employees. We've all faced it. People resist change. Now, people resist change for a lot of reasons, but most of the time it's from lack of understanding of the benefits, fear of the unknown, obviously, or simply comfort with the status quo. It's the way they've done it. They're comfortable. They don't want to have to learn anything new. This is where learning can come in. Learning is actually the key to change management, but a lot of organizations don't see the partnership with learning as being critical to things like dealing with resistance. So even within your own learning evaluation, you're going to meet your own level of resistance, and thinking about how you can deal with that and what's the best way to approach resistance is also key. And then, of course, inadequate measurement of the impact of training programs. Now, again, we use different models for evaluation, and you can measure some impact, but most companies only measure like basically whether or not people liked the training or said that they enjoyed it. They don't really measure the impact, and there are lots of ways to do that. It does take time to figure out how to do it, but I'm going to give you some case studies to show how people use that model and ways that you can use it to benefit the organization. So you have to have a strategic approach is what I'm really trying to get at, right? This isn't just something you throw together. You have to have a strategy for how you're going to go about doing this, and starts with the business goals. Then you're going to do a needs assessment. That helps you manage change effectively. And then employing rigorous evaluation techniques helps you to actually prove that what you're doing is working. It is actually benefiting the organization, right? So these are some common challenges, but they can be overcome. Now, when you think about learning in an organization, and we know, I know Susan's been in this situation, and Rochelle, I know, has been in a situation where you are you are the learning for the organization. And so the problem is that it's hard to be everywhere and be a part of all of these different conversations. But one of the things that's important to recognize is that an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. So I use quotes like this, I use information like this to have a discussion with leaders to say, listen, this is how learning actually helps you have a competitive advantage. So I need to be in the conversations at the beginning, not where they've made all the decisions and now they go to learning and say, okay, now make it happen. And you're like, wait a minute, I wasn't even a part of this conversation. So you can help along the way if you have a learning strategy, and that involves getting aligned with those business objectives from the beginning. What the business leaders want to know, what the senior leaders want to know is, how does this make the business better? How is this going to make us more money, right? And it does, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But just know that this is your competitive advantage, especially now with how everything is changing. is to make sure that your organization has the ability to learn and translate that into action. All right, so let's talk about what kinds of things actually do that learning does affect in the business in a profound way, and ways that you can think about this and align this with your organization. So first of all, it enhances organizational performance. That's kind of a no-brainer. Like, obviously, if you're learning, you're going to hopefully comprehend that and then enhance organizational performance from your learning, right? But really what it's doing is making sure that we're aligning with the business outcomes and that skills and knowledge are applicable and beneficial. We don't want people to have to learn things that aren't going to be helpful to them. And we don't want people to not learn things that are going to be helpful to them, so they don't have that available, right? So you want to do strategy reviews between HR, L&D, and business leaders regularly. One of the things I do when I go into an organization is the first thing is to set up meetings, regularly scheduled meetings between myself, HR, and the business leaders and stakeholders, because I want to be a part of every conversation that I can be. So when you have these strategy reviews, they start to think of you as a strategic partner rather than just the order taker that's going to deliver their training for them. We are not a restaurant, right? We're professionals that are going to be delivering for the business. And so the other thing is that you want to design the learning objectives around the specific business goals. I worked in an organization where a lot of those goals didn't seem applicable to my team. And what we did was we thought about them in terms of like how we were contributing to those business goals. And that helped us design our strategy. And then, of course, again, incorporate feedback from not just leaders, but from everyone. Anyone that wants to give you feedback, you should take it. But also keep in mind that conducting those feedback assessments is really important, the way that you do them, so that you can get actionable feedback. And again, this is a place where other organizations, outside vendors that have a lot of skill in this area might be helpful in designing your surveys. Survey development is actually quite a skill, and a lot of people don't have that skill because they just haven't developed it yet. So make sure you work with somebody that has a lot of skill in that area. All right, so the next thing is it supports change management. This is my favorite talking point, is that learning actually supports change management. And as we know, what's happening all the time? Change. I mean, the only thing that we can count on really is change. And so right now, look at the exponential change that's happening with AI introduction, right? And so change management is going on all the time. And if you're not aligning your initiatives with organizational transformation, new technologies, market shifts, or equipping your employees with new skills and challenges and workflows, that change management is not going to be as successful. I'm sure all of you have been a part of situations in which change management was not done at all, and that change was made and it causes a lot of problems. Getting people to adapt to that change, getting people to understand it, that becomes a difficult task. And then people just don't do it. They don't follow along with it, right? So you can align that by developing learning modules to specific to upcoming changes. And then, of course, again, involve L&D early in planning. I can't emphasize enough that when you have strategic meetings, learning and development should be a part of that. If you don't have someone in learning and development, then having someone in the room that is thinking about what L&D we might need so that you can start to think about how to do that if you're contracting out, et cetera, is so important. If you're not thinking about how you're going to teach people, you're not really going to have success in whatever it is you're doing. It will be way more painful for the employees. And it's the thing that frustrates them. And then they don't want to, they just want to ignore it because they don't want to, or they become disgruntled and demotivated, right? And then the next thing that is important is it improves retention and engagement. Now, when I talk to business leaders, this is one of the things I use a lot because it's just a fact, which is that retention is incredibly important and engagement is incredibly important because both of those things affect not only your work productivity, but it affects your bottom line. So in an organization, if you think about this, let's say you're a small organization or all the way up to a large organization, just increasing your retention in your company by 1% for the year can lead to tens of thousands to millions of dollars in revenue that you're retaining at your company. So it's not a small thing to increase retention, even if you do it by a little bit, right? And then engagement is incredibly important because that's what gets people, working together and collaborating effectively. So what employees really want, though, is they want learning programs that focus on their career progression needs. And there are not a lot of them, even in companies I've seen that do it pretty well. There's still a lot of challenge in developing career progression programs. So we want that because it creates more engagement and it creates the opportunity for that person to feel invested because you're investing in them, right? They're going to feel more valued. So you want to link learning and development to career advancement in the company and create and publicize career paths supported by specific training programs, and then regularly discuss career development with employees. So when you're thinking about your learning strategy, you want to think about how you are strategizing to encompass these last three things we talked about, how you're helping to improve those through your learning strategy. And this gives you the talking points also to talk to senior leadership about how learning and development is going to help, how this strategy that you're going to create and evaluate your current one and then create a new one is going to benefit the organization, right? All right, so we have one more Menti poll, and that is, what methods do you use to currently evaluate? Oh no, this one is, what methods do you use for any frameworks you've used in the past? But before I do that, before we switch to our next session, I want to see if anyone has any questions about how to evaluate your learning strategy, or what are the components of it, or wants to offer anything else that they've experienced that might be helpful to the audience. Oh, yes, Susan.
I just was curious, thinking about needs analysis. Does anybody use like a governance model where they've got business leaders that are part of an ongoing committee, if you will, that you meet with regularly so that they're keeping you informed and you're staying tuned and they're helping to sort of course correct where learning should be focused? Just curious if anyone's used that approach.
Yeah. Has anyone used that approach that's on the line? No governance there. Everyone's like, what?
I did years and years ago at a relatively small company, smaller mid-sized company, about 1,000 people. So the manufacturing directors had a quarterly meeting with them. I was constantly talking with them one-on-one, but got them all together at one time so they could hear each other's ideas as well.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Something you'd replicate again, or you're like, it was probably more energy.
I would, yes.
Okay.
I tried at my most recent company, but didn't get the buy-in level that I was needed there. So, but it worked very well at the previous company that I did it at.
Yeah.
I would add on to that. I haven't personally done it, but I'm part of a super user network of leaders, and super users are a great way to do exactly what you're talking about. That concept of, you're getting your people who are in the seat. So you're not getting the leaders per se, but you're getting the people in the seat. So similar concept, utilizing them as your trainers, but also then having those meetings to know what needs to be continued in the learning aspect of it. So I've seen that be really beneficial across the business in a number of places.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. So while you're all entering, I'm using 3 different models that I'm going to talk about. I'm sure that people have used other frameworks. So just if you're familiar with any of them, go ahead and answer the Menti. But I want to answer Kirby's question, what's a realistic timeline for determining ROI? That is an excellent question, Kirby. And I will say that, first of all, it depends. Some of it is how soon can you determine ROI? And actually, I'm going to give you an example in a case study of how they use the Phillips ROI model to determine what that change was. But I can say from my specific experience that what I've seen is that it can take 6 months to a year to determine ROI. It really depends on how much time it's going to take for people to apply what they've learned, and then how soon you can see what that impact is, right? So I would give yourself at least 6 months to be able to see that change and the impact, because it takes at least a quarter or more for you to even start to see change happening. But that's just a general time frame, and you kind of have to think about it in terms of, what inputs am I going to use to determine what the ROI is, and how often can I get access to those inputs, right? So if you're basing it on sales, for instance, you can only get that quarterly typically. So you're going to use those so you'd want to show a quarter over quarter, so about 6 months. But it really does depend. So anyone else who wants to offer any insights on that question, because that's a great question. Okay, cool. All right, so a lot of people have used Kirkpatrick's. Some people have used Phillips ROI. Nobody's used CIPP. In fact, a lot of people have never heard of it. So it'll be interesting for you to learn a little bit about that model. All right, so let's go back over to the presentation. Oh. My mouse is being uncooperative. All right, there we go. Technology. When we were all like, this is going to make our lives easier. All right. So let's talk now about these frameworks, right? So we've talked about the strategy. Why is it important to have a learning strategy in the first place? How do you go about evaluating your learning strategy? And what are some of the reasons that you should have a learning strategy? What are the benefits to the organization? And also some of the common pitfalls in learning evaluation. So now let's talk about some of the frameworks and models you can use for evaluation. Of course, I've already given it away by talking about Kirkpatrick's earlier, but let's dive into these 3 popular models. And first, we're going to start with Kirkpatrick's 4 levels. Now, Kirkpatrick's is been around for a really long time. It is highly effective. Where people get stuck is they can easily get reaction, right? How do people directly respond to the training? People are going to tell you whether they like it, don't like it, what they liked about it, etc. But the next level is learning. So what knowledge and skills employees acquired due to the training? Now, this is sometimes harder to find out. If you took the training, you can say, okay, they took it, but as was said earlier, completion isn't comprehension. So measuring learning or understanding the learning can be a little bit more challenging. Then even more challenging is, did it change their behavior? How are you going to figure that out? And a lot of times you have to think about what tools you're going to use. We're going to talk about data tools in a moment. What tools are you going to use to ensure that you can figure out if behavioral change happened? And then finally, what's the impact? So how the business goals are impacted by the training? Are you seeing improvements in areas that are important, right? So this is really the basic Kirkpatrick model. Now, I'm going to show you the Phillips ROI model, but don't get too overwhelmed because I want you to just remember this. Basically, Phillips is Kirkpatrick plus 1 more level. But what it's showing you in this model is that it is a process you can go through to actually get to this ROI. So you're going to do your initial analysis and then your measurement and evaluation. So I know it looks a little bit like, wow, this is a lot, but just remember, it's Kirkpatrick's plus ROI. So it's just 1 more 5th level there, which is, can we prove that there was a return on the investment? Both models are excellent. Sometimes you have to prove the ROI, and not just the ROI of the investment of time, but really, did it affect the company in some way, in a measurable way financially? The last one is what's called CIPP, which is Context Input Process Product Model for Training Evaluation. It's a very comprehensive framework, and it assesses different aspects of program planning, implementation, and effectiveness, and helping guides decision-making through a project's life cycle. So when you're using this is for something that is slightly more complex, but when I show you the case study, it's gonna make a lot of sense to you. So these are just 3 different frameworks. As we said, there are a lot of other frameworks that are available to you. And so understanding which framework is going to work for you is also crucial. And that's another decision you have to make. The decision tree is wide here. So how do you do it? How do you actually decide which model to use? Well, you want to think about it from, again, starting at organizational objectives. We're always starting there. And then what are the scope and the scale of the training programs? Do you need something where you're going to manage a really big project? Maybe you need CIPP. Maybe it's a smaller project and you can just deal with it from the framework of Kirkpatrick's. But maybe you do have to prove that ROI, so maybe you need to use Phillips, right? So you really have to think about the scope and scale. And then what's the model's ability to provide actionable results? Am I going to be able to get the information I need out of this model? Do I need to use a different model to get the information I need? So it might be that you're like, I want to use CIPP, and then you're like, but I'm not going to be able to really get the information I need given the resources I have available to me. So maybe I'll just use Kirkpatrick's. Obviously, stakeholder needs, got to have that. We know when you work in learning and development, everybody's a stakeholder basically, but there are key stakeholders and you have to meet their needs, right? Especially the learners. Of course, this is something that people don't talk about enough in learning development, which is resource availability, because a lot of times there isn't a lot of resource available. So this is when, again, you might consider leveraging outside sources for parts of your learning strategy evaluation that are more complex and are going to need more time to develop. And then you would partner with that person. And then, of course, the flexibility of the model. You don't want to get into a model that now you need to change something and this model is just not going to be flexible enough, and then you have to revamp everything. So these are just the top 6 considerations when you are choosing the right evaluation model. And again, all of this stuff is about strategy. How do I strategize this effectively so that I get to where I want to go? No one thinks about the fact that learning and development is all about strategy, but it is, right? So let's look at some case studies of how we apply those frameworks so they make a little bit more sense, because they're theoretical if you haven't used them, especially CIPP. So the first case study is a financial services case study. So this was a financial organization, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, obviously, but I'm just going to explain it. So a financial services firm implemented a new sales training program, and they used the Kirkpatrick model to evaluate participants' reaction, their learning, their behavior, and results. And that led to significant improvements in sales performance and revenue growth. So you can see on the slide, I detail all of this out, but you can see that basically in the beginning, they used post-immediate surveys. Then they had assessments post-training, assessments to see what the knowledge level was. I'm a fan of pre and post assessment, but if you could only do one, then post assessment is it. And then, of course, 3 months later, so Kirby, this gets into what you were talking about. So 3 months later, they did an evaluation that showed the effective application of these techniques. So you can do that to then start to lead to your ROI, right? And then 6 months after training, they showed a measurable improvement in sales performance. So it's not just about creating the learning and, okay, we're done, here's the learning, you go take it and hope for the best. It is really about, did we meet the goals of affecting the organizational goals in a meaningful way? And Kirkpatrick is a good way to prove that. So this is just an example of how you could use Kirkpatrick in action. So let's take a look at Philip's ROI model. So this one, we're going to use a healthcare provider case study. So in this one, a healthcare provider launched a leadership development program, and they used the Philip ROI model to demonstrate a return of $2.50 for every dollar spent on the program, supporting the continuation and expansion of their program. So again, I broke this down, so don't be daunted by Philip's ROI. It's basically Kirkpatrick, those 4 plus out a financial assessment, right? So now what was the impact financially? And again, this is something I do a lot because a lot of the work I do is contractual. So when I'm proving ROI, when somebody's hiring you, you need to be able to prove ROI to them because they're making an investment. So we've got the Kirkpatrick's, and then they use all of the things we used in the financial sector study evaluation, and then they assess the program's costs against the savings, and that's how they came up with their ROI. So pretty straightforward, even though Philip's looks a little daunting, it's pretty clear how to do that. When you're establishing ROI, that's something you need to discuss at the beginning, how you're going to figure out what that ROI is and what it's measuring. So don't wait to the end to try to figure that out. Make sure that's part of your strategy. Then this last case is an educational institution case study. In this case, a university revamped its online MBA program. They didn't feel like it was very effective. People were dropping out and they didn't know what was wrong. So they revamped it. They did a learning evaluation. They revamped their program and they used the CIPP model. And that gave them significant improvements in graduation rates, post-graduation employment, and student satisfaction. So you can see the CIPP model, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail since most of you aren't familiar with it. So they start with a context evaluation. So the initial surveys and market analysis identified need for flexible industry-aligned courses. So when you're doing CIPP, you first want to create context. What is the context in which we are doing this program, which we're doing this evaluation? What is going on? Are we looking at how this is going to align with the business objectives? And also, as you know, with learning in different parts of the organization, sales are focused on go-to-market, right? Or products focused on go-to-market. Sales is focused on how to sell that once it is going to market. So what is the context of it? So they used surveys to determine that. Then they looked at input evaluation. So they used this to do a resource assessment. We don't do that enough. What resources are available to us? What people do we have that are actually experts in this area? And what infrastructure do we have that's going to support this program? So they did the input evaluation, then a process evaluation. They got student feedback and engagement. They monitored that continuously. So the CIPP, the thing you have to know, is a lot more on boots on the ground. You're really going to be doing things like doing a lot of surveys, a lot of questionnaires, probably focus groups. You're going to be monitoring and checking in with students, or in this case with students, but with your employees. And so it's a lot more involved, but it also gives you really rich data. And then finally, the product evaluation. So once the final evaluation showed significant improvements in graduation rates, et cetera, that's what you want to get to, is what is the product evaluation is in the final say, did we actually get what we wanted to get out of it, right? So they were very successful at this. It was a revamped program and it improved significantly. So there are different reasons to use different models. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you need to do to actually get there, right? So again, this is why a learning strategy is so important, because you cannot do this without having a comprehensive strategy. Bruce, you love that 5th level in the Phillips ROI. I'm with you on that. I'm always, ROI is a big part of what I do when I'm providing a learning strategy. Okay, so those are some of the some of the case studies. So, all right, great. We've talked about the importance of this. We've talked about some of the frameworks that you can use for this. So how do I develop an evaluation plan? How do I actually just go about developing this, right? So let's take a look at that. So to create a robust evaluation plan, you want to first start with what? Defining clear objectives. Shocking to everyone on the call, I know. But we want to have clear objectives about what this strategy is supposed to do. What are our final objectives? And then you want to choose an evaluation model. Remember, we looked at 3, but there are many more out there. So don't hesitate to kind of go and investigate and look at different models that might suit your needs. Then you're going to design the evaluation tools and methods, which we're going to talk about in a moment. What are all the different evaluation tools and methods? Obviously, you need to engage the stakeholders and make sure that everybody is agreed and understand what's happening and can give input. Then you're going to implement the evaluation. You're going to analyze the data, report on the findings. And that's really the end of it, actually. But what I say is there are 2 more steps, which is that's going to help you to make informed decisions. And then you'll update the evaluation plan after that. Because your evaluation plan, much like everything in learning, is obviously something that you have to keep updating and evaluating. It is not like we're one and done. That's our learning strategy. We're not going to do anything else. That's it forevermore. That's not how that works. So you update your evaluation plan, you go ahead and implement, right? And then if you need to, you have to redefine the objectives, et cetera. But most of the time when you update the evaluation plan, you're going to just then implement it again. So you'll start at the implement phase. All right, let's see. We got a couple of questions. Stakeholder engagement helps if you talk the talk, and even better if you walk the walk. Absolutely, Bruce, that's absolutely true. Questions around engaging stakeholders after choosing evaluation model and not getting their buy-in for the eval model. So there's 2 different ways to think about this. You can go ahead and do that. You can get stakeholder input on the evaluation model. And I highly recommend that, especially if you're like a lone learning person in your org. But when you choose an evaluation model, remember that you're choosing an evaluation model based upon the objectives to begin with and what you think it's going to take to implement that. You can, however, approach the stakeholders and have that conversation ahead of time. This part of it where I'm talking about the evaluation plan strategy is engaging the stakeholders before you implement the evaluation. So you choose an evaluation model. You're going to come and say, this is my recommendation. That may change before you implement it. So you can do it either way, whatever works for your org. But I usually come to the table with something for the stakeholders so that it's not just so open-ended, because then you get a lot of input that may not be as helpful. That's just my strategy on it. All right, so that is all great. This is how we're going to do this, but let's talk about some practical tools and techniques that are going to help you to be able to develop and implement a learning strategy. Again, I love quotes, but I want you to remember that we're living in what we call a VUCA world. This is a military term, but it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Anybody feel like we're not living in that world right now? I mean, it's complex, right? So what I want you to think about is that what learning is supposed to do is supposed to help you to make this less complex, right? It's supposed to help you simplify things and to make things less predictable. But when we're living in that world, that's why you have to think about learning as a way to improve productivity and competitive advantage, because you're going to take that volatile world and make it less volatile for the learner. You're going to make it simpler, less complex. That's what learning is supposed to do. It's supposed to be able to develop that. So remember that this is how companies are going to have their competitive advantage. And that's really the only way to get there, because look at what's happening with AI. Who was ready for that? Sorry, when my mouse skipped. Who was ready for that to happen as fast as it did? Not, I can tell you, not many businesses. So this is what learning can do for an organization. All right, so what are some of the data collection and analysis tools? Now, I'm going to go a kind of a deep dive on some of these as far as offering you many different options. But just remember, this isn't something that you necessarily need all of these tools, but they're just tools to think about. All right, so the first one is surveys and questionnaires. All of you are probably familiar with surveys and questionnaires. We fill them out all the time, right? So you want to think about things like the tool you could use is SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, Qualtrics. Most of those, Google Forms is easy because it's free. SurveyMonkey to a certain degree is free, it depends. Interviews and focus groups is another method, and the tools you can use for that are digital recording tools, transcription software. There's a lot of great transcription software out there now. So I know Bernie used Fathom, and there are others where it attaches to your meetings, and not only does it record, but it transcribes everything and it organizes it into notes. It's a great. Free pizza for focus groups, absolutely. I used to actually work in a role where I had to, get focus groups together for the company I was working with all over the world. And it's funny because in some countries, so we would pay people, right? But in some countries, you can't give people money for that. In Japan, you could only give them beer coupons. Was the thing that we gave them, which you couldn't get away with doing in the US. So thought that was really interesting. So the other thing is assessment tools, right? So LMS has assessment tools. If you don't have an LMS, you can use questionnaires and surveys to do assessment, follow-up, but it's so much harder because when they're in the LMS and they're taking a course, it's easier if the assessment is in there. They're more likely to take it. But there are other ways you can do that. Next is observation tools, right? So do I observe the behavior? Am I paying attention to that? So behavioral checklists and rubrics you can use for observational tools. And then another method you could use is analysis techniques. In that you're going to think about things like statistical analysis software, SPSS. Guess what? You can just use Excel to do statistical analysis. So you don't have to buy anything fancy, but there are other tools that you can use. One of my favorites is data visualization tools. Does anybody use data visualization tools at work, like Tableau or Power BI or any of those? I love data visualization tools. I love being able to put in information and then it just visualizes it for me. Another newer one is text analysis software. Hannah uses Power BI, and Bruce says, yeah, and Tableau. Who else? Somebody said they use Tableau too. Yeah, Susan says she uses Tableau. They're great tools. Text analysis software. This is a little bit newer. This, I can't tell you, is so critical to have if you have a lot of qualitative data, because as you know, Qualitative data is harder to analyze because it's open-ended, right? It's usually comments or feedback that is written. So you can use tools like NVivo or Atlas TI, but there are so many out there, and it's a great tool to use if you have a lot of qualitative data. And then the next one is learning analytics. Obviously, you can use advanced analytics from your LMS, continuous monitoring and reporting tools, like completion rates, engagement rates, etc. And depending on the LMS, there's a lot of different things you can use for that. And then, of course, automated reporting tools like you would get from the LMS, where it sends you an automatic report on different things that your LMS can report on. So these are just some of the data collection and analysis tools that you can use, but these are the tools you want to be thinking about. What methods are you're going to use for collecting the data from the framework that you chose and the evaluation method that you're implementing. So I wanted to show you another view of this to show you that which of these collect quantitative versus qualitative data. And so what I want you to think about is that you should combine quantitative methods like surveys and tests with qualitative methods like interviews and focus groups. And that's going to give you a much more comprehensive view of training effectiveness. Obviously, you can't do this for every single training, but when you roll out your learning strategy, you want to be doing this as you're moving along. Especially with the initial launch of whatever training is going to be launched for the company, so that you have the opportunity to kind of see and get feedback in real time. It is something whenever I launch a new program, we do interviews and focus groups just to make sure that we have qualitative feedback as well. Don't just go off quantitative. Qualitative is crucial. All right. So before I move on to using AI in learning strategies, which is our last section, I just want to see if anyone has any questions, comments about the frameworks and models and the tools that you can use for evaluating learning in your organization for your strategy. Okay, thanks, Marcella. So many tools, so little time. I know, it's so true. It's like just when you think you've got it all down, then they're like, here's some new ones. No. All right, so AI, of course, is a big part of how we're working and living now. It's a part of everyday life. I use ChatGPT many times a day to ask questions. It's way better than Google search, I can tell you that. So here's some AI, using AI in learning strategies. So one of them, of course, is adaptive learning systems. And again, there are a lot of AI learning systems now. There are a lot of LMSs that have AI integrated into them. And what they do primarily is create personalized learning paths. And so it's enhanced relevance and engagement for the person. They pay attention to what people are choosing and they make recommendations. It's like Netflix or any of those kinds of services where there's an algorithm that's kind of monitoring what you're doing. Everything's monitoring what we're doing, right? But in a learning system, that's wonderful because really the future, y'all, is personalized learning. It is the future, right? So some adaptive learning system platforms are Docebo, Saba, Cornerstone Learning, Thomson Reuters Checkpoint Learning, Area 9, Lyceum, but there are so many, I could never fit them on. This whole presentation could be full of that. So think about adaptive learning system platforms that you might be able to use internally and how you might be able to integrate that into your learning strategy, especially from a career development point of view for learning strategies for career pathing for employees. All right. It also can enhance content delivery. So there are intelligent tutoring systems and voice activated technology. And really what they do is provide real-time feedback, and voice activated technology like Amazon Alexa can make learning more interactive and accessible. You can actually use your Amazon Alexa in your home if you have one, and it can play games with you. You can learn from it. There's all kinds of things you can do already, but there's ones that are for business. Google Assistant is one that I use a lot for voice activated technology. There's also IBM Watson Assistant. Intelligent tutoring systems, these are just some, again, I listed 3, but there are many, many. Carnegie Learning Mathia or Mathia, Alex, which is assessment and learning in knowledge spaces, and Guru Producer. But there are so many that you can choose from. And these allow the learner to get real-time feedback. So kind of like you would do in a course where you're using simulations and you're getting feedback in the simulation, but this is actually giving you feedback on your learning. They're really cool if you've ever seen them. I enjoy using them. And then streamlining administration and leveraging data, right? So the other way to use AI, and really the way that most of us will probably use it, is for efficient administration and assessment. So there are automated grading and feedback. You're not probably going to be using Turnitin. It's more at a high school and college level. But I don't know, if you work in an area where people have to write papers or something, it might be something used. Kahoot is another one. Again, we talked about Tableau before, predictive analytics. There's Tableau, SAP SuccessFactors. Again, many different places, many different platforms where you can get predictive analytics about learning. Data-driven decision making. I've tried to put in some that are like low cost and some that are probably higher cost, but Moodle is actually an LMS that a lot of people use, and you can get learning analytics from it. It's very inexpensive. And then of course there's Microsoft Power BI, a little bit more expensive. And then AI and talent development. So LinkedIn Learning has LinkedIn Insights. So if your company uses LinkedIn Learning, you can get a lot of insights from that. And of course, another one would be IBM Watson Talent. But again, there are many different tools that you can use. These are just some of the AI tools that are available to you. Again, so many tools, so little time, as Susan said. Any questions specifically about AI in talent development? Or in any of the things we talked about? Or any recommendations? I can tell you some of the AI tools I use. Obviously, I use ChatGPT, but one of my other favorites is Claude AI. I like Claude because it writes more like a person. Then ChatGPT can sound very formal, and you can ask it to not do that. But I think maybe one of the next things we should do, Bernie, is have a course just on utilizing AI for creating content, etc. Because I do use AI for helping with content generation, etc. And you definitely should. But Claude is a great one. There's ones that create presentations for you. I mean, AI is pretty much everywhere now. And how to figure out your AI prompts. Yes, this is a big part of it, is how do you write AI prompts? And so, yeah, I've been working on that quite a bit to make sure I get the information I need, because sometimes you put things in and you're like, that is not exactly what I wanted you to the information I wanted from you, but thanks. Prompt engineering is a training on its own. It really is, Bruce. And there are quite a few courses that are available. Udemy has a few of them, I know, but it's definitely something worth investing your time in, is to learn prompt engineering for AI. Marcella says, thank you for covering AI. I know it's the great unknown right now. It is. I think it's just a new technology that a lot of people are unfamiliar with, and they're not really sure the applications and, how to use it ethically is the other thing, right? Because you're like, I don't want to not do my own work, but at the same time, how can we use it to be more efficient? And for me, things like data analytics are critical. I'm in my doctorate program right now, and I will upload a lot of data and have it analyze the data for me so that I don't have to do it manually. So you can use it for a lot of different things. It's not going to visualize the data for you, but it can give you feedback on the data. All right. Okay, so we are going to our key takeaways now. So to recap, we've covered the importance of learning strategy evaluation, some popular evaluation models, practical tools and techniques, and how to leverage AI in learning. And so I encourage you to apply these concepts to enhance your training programs. But let's look at some of our key takeaways. So first, the importance of learning strategy evaluation. Obviously, it has to align with the organizational goals, ensure resources and effectiveness, and supports continuous improvement. That's why we need a learning strategy, because it does all of those things. It helps the business be better. Evaluation models, so Kirkpatrick model, obviously. We have learning analytics. We have 360-degree feedback. So those are some of the evaluation methods. Challenges and solutions we talked about. So how do you address misalignment and resistance to change? Well, you create a learning strategy that's going to help you to be able to address those issues. And then aligning learning initiatives with business outcomes. So we're aligning with our organizational goals, but we're also aligning with the business outcomes. What are the outcomes? So goals and KPIs, right? And then AI learning strategies. So like we can make learning more adaptable through AI. We can create content delivery with intelligent tutoring. And of course, we can improve engagement via AI powered. Oh, what are you doing here? Okay, there we go. AI powered gamification. And then finally, just continuous improvement through feedback and data-driven decisions. That's really what we're working on with a learning strategy. That's great. We have a learning strategy, we implemented it, but is it working? And how do we use data-driven data information to drive our decisions future forward? All right, let's see. I want to see what chat says. Oh, and the AI integration is awesome these days. I attended a webinar showing Microsoft Copilot Office. I had to pick my job off the floor. Bruce, that's what Bruce said. Yeah, Copilot is actually really powerful. I noticed that as well. I saw this clip the other day, how to tell AI that you want to improve your AI prompt. Oh, thank you, Susan. So much good information in here. Thank you all for sharing. All right, so we're going to open the floor for questions. Also, feel free to share your experiences or ask for any further clarifications on any of the topics we covered today. But just want to be open and see what people think, if they have any questions about what we covered, if I need to go back to anything, or if you want to share information about how you have created a learning strategy at your organization. Or your experiences with them. Bruce said, you mentioned bringing in outside org. Bringing in outside org helps bypass company politics. They can ask about the elephants in the room. Bruce, that's so important. I'm really glad you brought that up. It is definitely, especially with things like needs assessment, it is really something that, for instance, us at Insignia, we can do. All of us are trained in needs assessments and have done many of them. I know Lauren has done a lot. I've done a lot. I'm sure Bernie has, as well as Denise. And so it allows them to ask questions that might be more uncomfortable for somebody who is working in the org. It also allows you to challenge bias because I know in learning that I see a lot of bias. I will have managers come to me and say, this is what this person needs training on. And I'm like, well, why do you think that, right? One time I had someone come and say that their employee needed time management training. And I'm also a coach. And so I decided to coach her. And she did not need time management training. She needed energy management training. She needed to understand her own energetic needs so that she was planning to do the hard things at times when she had more energy instead of like waiting to the end of the day. And so we helped to reorganize how she was doing things. And I helped her to have some conversations with her manager. And the next time I met with her after she implemented them, she was like, you have changed my life. And I was like, no, you changed your life. We just came up with a strategy for how you are going to do that. I'm not taking any responsibility for changing your life. I can't even change my own life. But it's really important to think about the fact that the people don't always know because they have a particular bias. They look at it and they say, oh, that person doesn't know how to manage their time, when in fact, it may not be that at all, right? Energy management. Yeah, Bruce. So one of the things I teach a time management class. And in that class, I teach people that there's no such thing as time management because you can't manage time. It's happening. It all happened while we were sitting here, right? We don't have any control over it. But what we can do is manage our energy. So what people end up doing is they put things off until the end of the day when they have low energy. And then the hard things are like, doing some kind of strategic planning and they're waiting till Friday at 4 o'clock. It's like, you're not going to be able to complete that Friday at 4 o'clock. I'm just going to tell you now. So understanding your own energy cycles and understanding when to plan things so that you have the most energy is critical. Like I need about 90 minutes and most people do after they wake up to be at peak energy. So if you're planning, if you're getting up at 6 and you have a 6:30 a.m. meeting, guess what? You are not at your best. Even if you can try your hardest, but you're depleting your battery more because you are, draining energy you don't have, basically. So just something to think about. Maybe I should do time management class for a bit. My untime management class. Yeah, it's a good class because I also teach a lot about just the reasons why our brains don't like to manage time and how we struggle with why we struggle with it. Being human is hard. We're operating in a system in which it's not very human in that sense, right? Any hot takes on why we even have the first level of Kirkpatrick? It's not learning. That's a good question, Kirby. So I think having general reaction is important. It isn't learning, but it is the first level of understanding whether or not the people that you are training, whether it's online, etc., thought the training was effective or enjoyed it. And the reality of it is, and I tell people this all the time, if you don't enjoy the training, you're not going to remember it. I'm a big fan of talking about Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve and how people basically forget everything they learned within 7 days, that you only retain about 10% of information that you learned 7 days ago, unless you have a way of reinforcing it. So if people don't enjoy it, they're not going to reinforce it. And if they're not going to reinforce it, then it was a waste of time, right? So I need to know whether or not that person even enjoyed it or thought it was useful. It is not useful to determine learning at all. You are absolutely correct. But it is useful for the people who develop the training to understand whether or not this training was the impact of it was good or not. So that's why we use it. To me, it's only useful if it's then followed up with questions, because if you didn't like it, I need to know why you didn't like it, right? And I'm not a big fan of saying things like, how can we improve? I don't think it's people's responsibility to tell you how you can improve, but also you're leaving it way open-ended. So my favorite question to ask is, what would make this even better? And when you ask that, that puts people in a mindset to actually give you feedback that will help make it better. Otherwise, you're going to get everything. You're going to get so much stuff that you're like, I don't know what to do with all of this. It's not actionable. So you want to make sure you design questions that are going to give you actionable feedback. But at least one question that's more open-ended than just the reaction, I think, is imperative, because people just put like, oh, 4 stars, or 5 stars. They don't care, or they might not say anything at all, right? My theory is that most of the time people only give you feedback if they really liked it or they really hated it. So you miss all the people in the middle if you don't ask for some qualitative feedback. Dawn says ADHD spectrum issues. Were you responding, Dawn, to Kirby? Are you asking about it? Time management. Oh, yes. So that's one of the reasons I talk about why our brains react their way to time. And also, when I do have ADHD, and I also have ASD. So I am it's one of the reasons I designed the training that I did the way that I did, because I am distracted all the time, right? So time management can't be thought of as time management. And that's why we talk about energy management and work on strategies for managing time when you are a person that has ADHD. Because, all of a sudden something happens out the window and you're over here now, right? I feel you on that. I coach a lot of people that have ADHD. So Joe says it helps to define reaction as engagement and relevance. The updated Kirkpatrick model defines it this way. That's true. Great emphasis on actionable feedback. Kirkpatrick's level 1 also signals to the learning function how they are perceived in the org. That's another good way of thinking about it too. If you are getting a lot of what I would consider 3s and belows, let's say it's a rating system 1 through 5, it may be also that it's just the perception of the learning or within the organization is not positive. And I've gone into situations where I come in and I'm a new leader, and the feedback on learning is not good. They are not happy. They don't want anything to do with learning. And then I have to work to get them to see me as a business partner and prove to them that learning is effective. So it's really important that you think about this from the perception of both how the learners learned and the perception of the org. Thank you, Lauren. That was a great comment. You may be interested in brain-centric design. It helps you. Yes. So when I design training, I design from a neurological point of view, an adult learning theory point of view, and obviously focus on what the objectives are and what we're expecting them to be able to get done. But everything that I do is from how the brain learns. I've moved my books, but I have like books that I've been referencing for that. So within my doctorate, I am doing a research project on using short films in learning and development because of the neurological effect on emotion for leadership development. So I'll let you all know how that turns out. Any recommendation resources for designing service for actionable feedback? Hannah, I do have a bunch of resources, but I will have to get them for you. So if you wouldn't mind sending me a direct message in here with your email, I will send you a bunch of different resources for that. And anybody else that wants them, you can also send that to me, and I will send you them. But here's the thing about designing surveys. It's really about learning how to write the questions effectively. And people just don't write good questions. And so I will send you some examples of what are good questions versus not good questions for what you're trying to get to. So anybody that puts this in here, all right, I will. Bernie, do you mind kind of capturing that for me? Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody that's interested in that, I will send that to you. This is one of my fortes, is survey creation and writing. And I spend a lot of time helping people with that because a lot of surveys are overwhelming for people and also poorly written. So again, don't ask people how you can improve. You know, you have to think about what you're really trying to get out of it. And we're very stuck in this idea of constructive criticism, which is not helpful at all. I mean, if it says the word criticism in it, it's not actually helpful. Yes, yeah, I will, Lauren, for sure. How many questions are reasonable on a survey? Okay, so here's the thing about the surveys. It depends. So this is the difference between a survey and a questionnaire. Two different things. Surveys, really, you want to try to stick to no more than 10 questions. I try to do between 5 and 7. If it needs to be longer than that, it is not a survey, it's a questionnaire. And questionnaires can be longer. They can be like 2 pages long, but you need to prepare people. And this is the other mistake people do. They're like, could you fill out this quick survey? And then you're like 15 minutes later, you're like, your definition of quick and my definition of quick, 2 different things. So telling people how long it should take them to fill out the survey is also a big part of survey design. Let people know what they can expect. So questionnaires can be anywhere from 10 questions to 50 questions. It just really depends. So how deep you want to dive is important, but really surveys, 5 to 7 questions, no more than 10. People won't want to fill them out otherwise. And they get surveyed to death as it is. So, okay. Any other questions, surveys, or anything else we brought up? You can just pick my brain if you want to talk about something other than evaluating theory. I've been doing this a long time. Yeah, so anything that is helpful to you that I can answer. Maybe we should do a survey design session. Ooh, would you guys like that?
Yeah, seeing some head nods, Michelle.
Oh, let's do that. Let's do that next, Bernie, because I can really, we can have fun with that, and it'll be really helpful. It's something that I just think we don't have enough information on. People don't get enough information on how to do it well.
Agreed.
All right. So, okay. So I'm going to write down some of these because I think they're coming to me directly. So, oh man. Okay. All right. Any other questions while I'm writing down email addresses? Any burning questions for today?
Yeah, quick one.
Yeah.
Going back to the needs assessment, I know a lot of that is around really staying connected with, you know, business leaders, HR, all the key stakeholders. And so that a lot of that can just happen in staying connected, having ongoing conversation. But if you're doing maybe a more formalized needs analysis, anybody have any templates or recommendations on like a good set of questions to ask, or how they approach doing like a real analysis and listening tour?
Listening tour, I love that. Lauren, do you have any input on that? Because I know Lauren is exceptional with needs assessments. If she's still on. Yeah, she is.
I'm on. Sorry, I'm running around here.
That's okay.
So we're looking for, sorry, can you repeat it? Survey questions?
No, I was just curious if anybody had any suggestions on, I know there's multiple ways to go about a needs analysis. Some of it can be informal through kind of ongoing conversations and relationships you have with, you know, key stakeholders in the business. But if you're going a slightly more formal route and you're having a focus group or interviews, I was just looking if anybody had any suggested set of questions or template for what they use for doing a needs analysis.
Oh, I like I really like the surveys that companies tend to send on their own. They usually come from HR. And I find that even if I don't love the questions that they're asking, they're very informative and they help me create better questions for those focus groups. So I would look at the data that they already have, even if it's not exactly what you want.
Susan, I can send you the template that I use for doing, it's kind of generalized, but the general template that I use to see kind of what kinds of questions I ask, would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind sharing. I've got
No, I don't
one, I
mind.
think it's referred to as like 7 questions. It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward, but always looking to see if there's other resources, other ways to think about it. So yeah, if you're willing to share, I'd love it. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Just put your email in chat so I can send it to you directly.
Yep.
All right, well, we are coming to the end of our time. I really appreciate all of the input and, just the feedback and interaction. So, what I'd like to do is just leave you with a call to action to take your learning strategy to the next level. You can follow Insignia Training Partners in your participant guide. There is links to all of this. You can contact us for personalized consulting. And we just really appreciate you spending an hour and a half with us today and participating. And I will stay on for a few more minutes if anybody has any other questions, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We appreciate your time and
Great to see you,
participation.
Michelle.
Nice to see you
This is
too.
excellent. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks,
Take care, bud.
everyone.